Can the defense of sovereign immunity be raised for the first time on appeal? To find out, you have to read Henry versus New Jersey Transit Corporation. But it's 51 pages. Don't have time for that? I've got you covered. This is TLDR, Too Long Didn't Read, Court of Appeals cases in 5 minutes or less. This is the episode on the case of Henry versus New Jersey Transit Corporation. It can be found at 2023 New York Slip Opinion 01467, published by the Court of Appeals on March 21st, 2023. The issue in this case is whether or not a defense of sovereign immunity has to be preserved in the lower court before it can be the basis of an appeal higher up. To understand this case, you have to understand three different concepts: the concept of sovereign immunity, subject matter jurisdiction, and CPLR 5601, which is appeals as of right to the Court of Appeals, as opposed to appeals by permission. I'll explain all that in a second. Basically, sovereign immunity is essentially the question of whether a court has the power to issue a judgment over the defendant. So you couldn't, back in 1,000 years ago, a court in England could not issue a judgment against the king because the king was sovereign. And in the beginning of this country, in the United States, the states were kind of different countries, were different nations, and couldn't be held accountable in each other's courts unless they consented to being held accountable in those courts. The next part is subject matter jurisdiction, which essentially is whether a court can adjudicate a matter about that subject. So a family court can't resolve a criminal court matter. A court of claims has certain powers that it's certain parameters of cases it can handle. District court or county court all have different subject matter jurisdiction. And if they act outside of that subject matter jurisdiction, if they adjudicate a criminal case in a family court, then the whole verdict, the whole judgment can be subject to review and can be questioned and voided because they didn't have authority to issue that decision or judgment. And the last part you have to understand is CPLR 5601. The Court of Appeals has different kinds of cases it can handle. And 5601 talks about appeals as of right. So there's the rule of two, where two dissents are issued on an appellate division case. It can go to the Court of Appeals as of right. But the second important thing here is that an appeal as of right can be made to the Court of Appeals if it relates to a constitutional question. Then the Court of Appeals has authority under 5601 of the CPLR to adjudicate that case. So what's the facts in this case? The facts are the plaintiff is Miss Henry, and Miss Henry is a passenger on a New Jersey Transit bus from New Jersey to New York through the Lincoln Tunnel, and there's a bus accident, and Miss Henry's injured. And she sues New Jersey Transit and the bus driver as an agent of New Jersey Transit, and she wins after trial. No objection is ever made, no motion is made with regard to sovereign immunity. She gets a verdict about $1 million, and New Jersey Transit, the defendant, appeals, trying to reduce the verdict amount, trying to vacate the judgment. And then during the course of that appeal, the United States Supreme Court issues a decision called Franchise Tax Board of California versus Hyatt. People call it Hyatt 3 in 2019. It can be found at 139 Supreme Court 1485, where they basically discuss the sovereign immunity defense and say that states are immune from other states' judgments unless they consent. So now New Jersey Transit adds to their appeal and says, hey, we're sovereign. We're New Jersey. A New York court can't make us pay $1 million. The appellate division disagrees. The trial court, it goes to the Court of Appeals, and they have a majority opinion and a dissent by Judge Wilson. In the majority, they say that the normal rule, they reiterate the normal rule, which is that everything that goes to the Court of Appeals has to be preserved at the lower court. You have to make your argument to the trial court first and let them adjudicate it, let the appellate division adjudicate it, and then go to the Court of Appeals. You can't raise things for the first time at the Court of Appeals, which they're doing here, or in the appeal, which they did to the appellate division, and now the Court of Appeals. New Jersey Transit says, well, hey, CPLR 5601 says that we have an appeal as of right to you if it relates to a constitutional question. And the Court of Appeals says, yes, but even that has to be preserved. 5601, they state, has to still be preserved at the lower court before it can be appealed. And the second thing that New Jersey Transit argues is, well, if we prevail in the sovereign immunity argument, then New York would lack subject matter jurisdiction, and we should then be able to make this argument. And the Court of Appeal says, no, that has to be raised as well. That it's a waivable defect. Even Hyatt 3, that case says it can be invoked or it can be waived. And if it can be invoked or waived, then it's not the kind of thing that would deprive a court of subject matter jurisdiction. Subject matter jurisdiction goes to the authority of the court, not the authority of the court to hold the defendant particularly liable, which is more of a personal jurisdiction question. But then there's a dissent by Judge Wilson, and Judge Wilson agrees that the New Jersey should lose, but he doesn't agree with the way they do it, what the majority does. He says, Hyatt 3 says that you're immune from other states unless you consent. And here, New Jersey Transit consented 3 different ways. First, they never actually invoked it, and they consented by conduct in litigating the case in New York. Secondly, they says that they consented by operating a multi-million-dollar business in New York. They can't ride around the streets of New York getting into car accidents and then saying, we're sovereign, you can't hold us liable. And thirdly, they consented because you're not allowed to treat your state differently than other states. And in New Jersey Transit can be held liable by operation of law. So if you can hold New Jersey Transit liable in New Jersey, you can't then discriminate against New York residents and say, well, New York can't hold us liable. So 3 different ways New Jersey consented. That's according to Judge Wilson and according to the majority. Either way, New Jersey Transit's liable. If you like what you just saw and want to see more just like it, please hit like or subscribe to let me know.